is the problem. Tis the season to reject. Well, controller wouldn't turn off, so I just took the battery out. It's pretty simple. 4 screws, and then you just pry these off kind of hard. I thought I might break it, but it won't break. The only thing is these triggers and springs, which are a real pain to get back in, so this is kind of a last resort. That was the second time taking apart a controller like this, so it might take a little while to get back together. You can see that's where the battery goes, plugs in here, you got the light bar and motors. The triggers, the R2 and L2 triggers just kind of fall out, and here are the springs that attach them at the buttons at the top. This is another piece you don't want to lose. It's actually the reset button that plugs in this tiny hole right there, and that has to be seated right. Putting this all back together with everything in place and not loose is really difficult, so if you don't have to do this, I wouldn't. So this little wire harness is a little difficult to get out, so you got to use pliers. Keeping in mind the orientation of that, the blue tab is pointed up, and that should let me pull this apart. Okay, now that blue tab is out, I have everything else. This just kind of popped out like that. It's a little fidgety, so be careful. Okay, you got this plastic piece off that holds the battery. Don't just yank on it. There's actually 2 clips on the other side that hook onto the circuit board. And so that probably just pushes right back in real easy. Taking off the plastic battery pack, unscrewing that and unclipping it, flipping over to the other side. You can see the circuits, and I put 2 dabs of super glue very carefully on the other side of here, just to keep the plastic from coming up. And since this was popping up a little bit, it would accidentally complete the circuit. This is where the home button presses in, and so with that down, it shouldn't activate on its own. Here you can see the silicone pad, where this might also be loose, but you just don't want that to complete this circuit being loose or anything. This is supposed to press in, and that pushes up on there. So if you're doing this at home, the installation is actually quite tedious, and there are these 2 notches right here and that one there that you have to line up these springs just right. The springs go on the shaft of these triggers, which will go in here. You see one of them is still in there, but you have to wrap the spring on the end of that shaft, which you can just push out like this. I'm not going to do that, but you get those in. Right, got this back on, just pushed right back in. There's a screw in here that holds the circuit board together. Before putting this plastic battery pack holder on, I made sure to install that wire ribbon. I also have this on for the light bar, and kind of put in the triggers. Now to reinstall these springs, which are very difficult to pick up, my thoughts are the long side, this side, is what rests into the groove, while the short side just kind of hangs out. and then the shaft will go into that hole. So you put it on the inside, and it's kind of tough to get back together because you're holding the triggers in place and also squeezing it together, and hopefully everything lines back up. Oh, of course, don't forget about the battery. It only plugs in one way, and also the reset button that has to go into that little hole there. Okay, have these springs back in, and I'm not gonna lie, it's a real pain in the butt. So if you don't have to take apart your controller, I wouldn't. And now the fun part is to fold this back up while holding both of these triggers together and not letting them fall apart, keeping this battery together, and at the same time keeping that button in there. So you can see how much work this will be to get back together. So I got the controller back together, put the 4 screws back in, shake it around, doesn't hear any loose buttons. This one kind of fell out when I was taking it apart, so I had to shove it back in there and hold it. And it's real nice to have both of them as they were and just neatly folded on